Good evening and welcome to my channel. Tonight we'll be continuing our reading of the Hearts of Argyle Godfrey by Nicholas Leonard. Chapter 2. I worked for 3 days after my physical. Then after that I had a wedding to attend to. I worked as a cart boy down at the Stop and Shop on Washington Street in Lynn only because I could get nothing else. It left me sunburned and kept my forearms tied with veins. It also kept me skinny from all that walking around in the parking lot. So though the wedding was for someone I went to high school with instead of anybody from my family, it felt good to get into some nice clothes as opposed to the orange neon vest I'd wear outside in the parking lot. All I had to wear was a white dress shirt, gray slacks, and a gray tux coat to put over my shirt. After shaving and showering, I was as handsome as a dolphin, and looking at my reflection, I almost forgot that my heart was in the drawer in my bedroom and not inside my chest. How languidly my confidence regressed within the mirror. So what was in my chest besides my lungs? I raised my hand as if about to knock my sternum like a steel door knocker hung. Nobody answers empty mansions' doors. I stopped, afraid to hear something reply. Perhaps afraid to hear a distant thump. My hand relented, falling at my side. My lungs now had more room to sigh. The thematic colors of the wedding were green and white, but nobody but me saw the color black. Black in the shadows, black in the tux of the groom, black in the wells of the vases from which white roses rose, black in the creases of the cupola, that cylindrical ceiling that had the attitude of David's marble hand as if he had cupped them and turned upside down. Father Calabasas stood with William Green beneath this cupola while the chatter in St. Mary's mumbled like an airplane engine outside, while Ariel White had yet to enter the church. William Green was wearing a green tie. I hadn't any ties to wear, nor would I have known how to tie one. So my white collared shirt stuck out between my gray suit coat like the underbelly of a dolphin. The groomsmen with white ties were like chess pieces, and the bridesmaids were like adjoining guardian angels in lime green dresses. When the organ started up with all that triumph exiting the pipes, it was almost as if the color white itself entered St. Mary's. Everybody turned in the pews to see Ariel White in the swan-colored gown with a veil instead of wings, and a smile that she turned down to the floor in adorable shame. Then the organ told her to walk, and she did, with everybody's heads following her trajectory. It seemed that the gown was moving for her because it so effortlessly concealed the movement of her legs. She approached the altar and faced her groom, and the colors white and green seemed tied together by the nimble way their eyes started to knit the air. I felt my teeth become tectonic plates, the rows against each other wrestling because it was a fleece I wouldn't wear. But weddings aren't a place for jealousy, so I fidgeted and recomposed myself when the organ music stopped and the vows began. I was in the back of the church, so I only heard their echoes, their voices reaching me the way the stars reach the earth after so much space and time. Although my heart had been removed, their kiss injected hope into the wound, a breeze intruding in the mansion's rooms. How intricate the alliance of mouths. We saw their jaws, but didn't see the movement of everything else. And that applause at the ending of their first kiss as husband and wife. I joined in, clapping too and smiling as I had in the photograph on the fridge. And how wonderful it was when the newlyweds turned their smiles to the clapping crowd, which seemed to encourage greater applause. We kept clapping even when the organ started up again, our hands like the beating wings of a swarm of birds as they exited St. Mary's together. The reception was held on the second floor of a bar not too far away, and I have to say that it seemed it had gotten incredibly brighter while we were inside St. Mary's. It was as if the sky babied itself up to congratulate the two beings of earth. It was almost as sunny as it had been when I was in Idaho. Maybe the sun's favorite thing to see is a happy bride after all, and that was what I was missing. I related much more to the white roses in the vases that decorated every table in the second-floor venue than I did to the other wedding guests. I found the cursive faces of the roses much more interesting than I did the happy faces of the green and white families, and I had the inclination that the roses knew how I was feeling. Their stems reminded me of the green stem that was on my glass heart where my aorta would have been. The bride's aorta pumped each laugh she laughed, the evidence of blood in its transit. Her cheeks were like a pomegranate cut in half. Similar to being in St. Mary's, I lingered in the aft of the venue, watching the newlyweds take the celebrated table at the front, which was draped in a French vanilla beige tablecloth, with olive green napkins guarding glasses of champagne and plates. Well, I didn't have a heart, but I had a liver, so the champagne that I was sipping alleviated me, but also made me sympathize with the white roses even more. And the more and more I sipped, the more I thought the roses bent towards me. I thought their sheets of petals had a nose and smelt the void within my chest. Perhaps in me they smelled a place to grow. It made me second-guess my doctor's choice, but the champagne whipped this uncertainty away. After the waiters and waitresses catered in dinner, they dimmed the lights, and the newlyweds came out onto the floor, where they became silhouettes when they started slow dancing to Elvis's Unchained Melody. I swear the roses drooped and turned their heads. I didn't heed their inanimate looks. Instead, I watched the dancing newlyweds. I almost smiled vicariously. When Elvis said, "And time it goes by so slowly, and time can do so much," I thought of my heart and how it had been so burdened in such a short amount of time, just in the span of years between high school and now. Those lyrics felt hollow, but then I realized I was the hollow one. Why did I have the image of my picture on the fridge in my head while watching the newlyweds dance? I'm not sure. Maybe we can talk all night, I was singing to myself at the bar alone 2 hours later. But that ain't getting us nowhere. I looked down at my bottle of Budweiser, a brown bottle a lot more rustic and knightish than the vases of white roses. I craned my neck. I told you everything I possibly can. There's nothing left inside of here. And I stopped singing because that last lyric reminded me of my empty chest, and my face remained up in the direction of the bar ceiling. I didn't sound as good as Meatloaf anyway. Luckily, the bartender had to run upstairs to deliver another crate of beer to the venue. I wasn't drunk, but I had drank enough to be brave enough to sing to myself. And it was a good thing I wasn't drunk, because that was the night that I met Andrea Compostela. She was so fair that at first I thought her make-believe. She didn't smile with her teeth, just lips. She wore a blue pantsuit and had blonde hair, but had eyes that hinted she was almost born a brunette. I would know later on that she was the daughter of the bar owners, and she was on the last leg of studying forensics in LaSalle University over in Newington. I'd also go on to learn about her passion for cinema. She was one of those people that watched the Oscars and made sure to have seen every movie that would be nominated. She was able to predict which movies would end up being nominated and almost for what. I'd come to know her favorite foods were carbonara pasta and chorizo. I'd come to know she sometimes played Minecraft on her laptop after midnight. So much I'd come to know about Andrea Compostela, but nothing compares to when I saw her first. Besides the dirty biker at one end of the bar, I was the only one seated when she walked behind the counter after the previous bartender and her exchanged some brief words concerning inventory. She walked over with her brown eyes finding their brownness in the color of my Budweiser bottle. This was what connected me to her, because in that moment of her eyes seeing that something else could be the same color as them, I think she had a fleeting episode of fractured identity. This she was much better at masking than me. "You aren't upstairs?" she noticed. The response popped out of my mouth. "I was." She took my empty and got me another. "So, what are you doing down here?" "I just don't know anybody there," I said, which was true, but it wasn't exactly why I had snuck out of the venue. So, get to know someone. How? Usually, she said, you start by saying your name. I put my hand over the bar counter and said, Argyle. Argyle. I've never heard that name before, she said, shaking my hand. Mine is Andrea Compostela. And your last name, Argyle? Argyle Godfrey. And what do you do, Argyle Godfrey? I push carts over at Stop and Shop. She took my answer with zero judgment. And you? I asked. And this was where she told me she helped out tending bar whenever she wasn't in Newington studying. She asked me if I attended college, and with one deep breath, I could have gone into my hiccups after high school, but I didn't. But this deep breath of mine ultimately tilted towards not telling her. I shrugged when I said I never thought of college. Anyway, who's getting married? An old high school peer, I answered. William Green to Ariel White. Real shame. Her mother was eaten by an alligator down in Florida a few years earlier. I was looking down at the bar counter. I think her parents retired early and moved there. She was walking a little Pomeranian when the alligator shot right out and snatched her. I lifted my face. Andrea looked on the verge of laughing. She had her lips pursed to keep it from sprawling out. I saw the stitches in her lips pulsate. Her laughter burst, and what a tourniquet my smirk became. She found this funny? I'm sorry, she fanned the air in front of her. I'm horrible. You are, I said inquisitively, amused by her amusement. It's just so dark, I suggested. She nodded, trying to reel her laughter back into herself, and asked if to redeem herself. How old was she? 60, I think. Again, she burst out in laughter. You're not going to be able to bring that laugh into a crime scene, Miss Compostela, I said, fidgeting on the stool. I was pleased with her amusement. I liked that she didn't care. Well, she probably did care, but she sure did have a dark sense of humor. And I think that's what hooked me. All right, she said defiantly with an expression that suggested she was prematurely getting her way. I'll let you have one more Bud Heavy if you take me upstairs. But you're tending bar. I study forensics. I know how to manipulate a crime scene. I surveyed the mostly vacant bar in a moment of sobriety before saying, All right, one more. That was the night I learned that though I didn't have a heart, I had a smile. And though I didn't have a heart, I could sing. And I did sing after a stranger handed me a flute of champagne that they didn't want. The champagne and Budweiser having a wedding of their own inside my belly. That flute of champagne was as good as finding the last nugget of gold in California. And that's what made me sing. Now they all turned their attention to the aft of the venue. All these strangers crowded around me while I sang Old Money by Lana Del Rey in my best Frank Sinatra voice, and none of them knew I didn't have a heart. Well, I did have it, but it wasn't inside me. It was in my bedroom drawer, and it was supposed to be given to a woman, and none of them knew that while I belted the ballad, they didn't know that I had learned the Lana song from my ex, one of the bigger heartbreaks that led to me losing the privilege of having a heart. My voice came in for a landing. When we were young and pretty, I finished singing, remembering my lack of a heart inside my chest. Thank God the crowd gave me just a moment to grieve before they exploded in applause that rivaled that which happened in St. Mary's. I encourage you to stop the story here and go listen to Old Money by Lana Del Rey. And listen and imagine me singing it to the wedding guests. Imagine the look on my face as I recalled the days of having a heart while singing, as I recalled my days in Idaho. Imagine the look of rapt attention on their faces. Imagine how I levied my arms as if to conduct their attention while also conducting the orchestra of my alcohol-fueled Frank Sinatra voice. Imagine my empty chest. Imagine my voice sounding like thunder accepting defeat when I sang that final haunting lyric, when we were young and pretty. Thus ends Chapter 2 of The Hearts of Argyle Godfrey by Nicholas Leonard.